Okay, everyone. Well, great meeting. We're going to turn it over to our webinar now and our campaign or our candidate forum. First off, I want to thank the League of Women Voters of San Diego. They are our moderators and they are incredible. I think this is I don't know how many years we've been working with them. It's great to work with them. They are great community partners and we appreciate the neutrality that they bring. We appreciate the reputation that they bring for good forums. So we're very, very happy and thrilled to have them with us. So thank you to the League, a big, big thank you. Also, a thank you to Don Krupp and Judith Munoz who put this together. So a lot of work on their part, and we do appreciate that. Thank you both. They're both board members on the CTC board. So thank you both for doing that. And also thank you to our candidates for city attorney that are going to be with us tonight, Mara Elliott and Corey Briggs. We appreciate you taking time out and coming to our community and talking to us about your platforms. Again, everybody, make sure you're registered to vote, learn about things. The League is also a great place to learn about all the ballot measures and everything else that's going on. So really use that as an excellent resource. I do. So thank you all so much. And I am going to turn it over to the League. And thank you and have a great evening. And I hope you enjoy the forum.
Thank you, Eden. Hello, my name is Donna Bartlett May with the League of Women Voters of San Diego, and I'll be your moderator for this virtual candidate forum. Even though we miss something by not being in person, there are advantages as well. Many more people who otherwise not be able to attend in person will be able to hear the answers from these candidates that will help them make a more informed decision when they vote. We do have some housekeeping rules. Audience members will be all on mute, so it isn't necessary to mute your phones or silence your dogs. Candidates, however, please silence your cell phones and mute yourself when not speaking, and please adhere to the time constraints. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, and we neither support nor oppose candidates or political parties, but always work on vital issues of concern to members and the public. The League moderates candidate forums such as the one tonight all over the country, using a format that most people find fair, balanced, yet informative. We have asked the candidates to defer from any personal attacks, but rather keep to the issues of the campaign. Our goal is for voters to be able to learn about the candidates rather than from bumper stickers or promos on TV and emails that the candidates use to display their competency for the position they are seeking. This forum is being recorded, and we have asked attendees to submit questions online before the forum, and we have quite a few of those. However, you are still able to submit questions during the forum through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to use civility and respect in wording your questions. Keep your questions succinct and please word your questions in a general way so all candidates can respond to them. Questions directed specifically to one candidate will be held until there are specific questions for all candidates. Question screeners organize the questions into categories of a similar nature to avoid repetition and assure topics of greatest interest are being asked within the time available. Also, screeners will ensure the questions asked are appropriate for the branch of government involved in this forum. The question screener for the League is Jane Andrews, and the screener from the Claremont Town Council is Judith Munoz. Timekeeper is League member Gail Mackler. She will be holding up paddles indicating time remaining for answers and the stop sign indicating time is up. We will adjourn by 8 p.m. With that said, I want to thank you all for joining in the Zoom webinar to become a more informed voter. We'll begin now. This is the forum for the Office of San Diego City Attorney. Candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statement, 2 minutes for their closing, and 1 minute to respond to each question from the audience. We will alternate who answers each question first. Prior to the start of this event, the order of speaking was determined randomly. Mr. Briggs will go first now for opening statements and go last for closing statements. And now, Mr. Briggs, please start your opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the League. I want to thank Claremont Town Council. Thank everybody for coming tonight. I want to thank Mara for being here as well. I look forward to the discussion. I'm Corey Briggs, and I'm running for City Attorney. The city attorney's job is threefold: to give advice to the mayor and the city council and to the departments, to represent the city in court, and to prosecute misdemeanors and infractions, the latter two being criminal matters. I'm running because the city needs to get rid of politics in the city attorney's office. It needs to be fully transparent in the city attorney's office and throughout the city. And we need to restore confidence that the city attorney's office is actually practicing law and doing it ethically, transparently, and competently. We don't have that now. I bring that to the office. So I look forward to the conversation tonight. I look forward to elevating the quality of lawyering on behalf of San Diegans. And I look forward to hopefully earning your vote tonight.
Thank you very much. Ms. Elliott?
Good evening. Thank you to the Claremont Town Council, League of Women Voters. Really happy that you were willing to give us this forum to talk about the city attorney race. It's a really important race, and there's a clear choice for voters, and I think that'll come across tonight as you hear the both of us speak. You've got a candidate who currently holds the office, who has made a living out of serving the taxpayers and has a history of moving the city forward, running against a person who has a history of stopping progress at the city of San Diego with well over 80 lawsuits against the city. And the question is, why would he want to leave this city? The progress that I bring to you is based on a record of achievement, looking at what we need in San Diego and protecting people, whether it's leading with gun violence restraining orders and ensuring that we take guns from folks who are dangerous and harmful to themselves or to others, to working with school districts to ensure that we have safety when it comes to gun storage in our homes. And I introduced a law last year to ensure safe storage of firearms. Running the Family Justice Center, which is something I took over as city attorney to provide services to victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. I've also paid careful attention to our future, and whether that's making sure that those who have drug addictions and become homeless because of it, and drug addiction often leads to misdemeanors, that they have a path forward, a place to go where they're going to get services and help, or protecting our recycled water program. And both of these programs have been litigated by my opponent, who again takes great pride in throwing a wrench in city government. Thank you. Look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the questions. Audience members can submit their questions during the forum. Don't forget, by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll start with some general questions, and we're going to start with Ms. Elliott. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the city of San Diego, and how would you resolve it?
I think at this current moment, it has to be COVID-19, which has had a devastating hit to the city's finances. I have been searching for opportunities to try to cut back, just like every department in the city of San Diego. And fortunately, it will not have to lay people off. But our revenue stream is very low, which means that the city needs to make sure that it's focusing on core services and protecting our public to the best of its ability. And really, at the end of the day, what we worry about are the streets that we're driving on to get home, the water we're drinking, whether we have a home to live in, whether our kids are going to safe schools or swimming in good water. Those are the issues that really matter to the city of San Diego, and that's where my focus has been, ensuring that we have the ability to provide those services without interruption to our public.
Thank you. Mr. Briggs?
The biggest problem we have in the city is a lack of confidence in our city government, and that comes primarily from the inadequacies in the city attorney's office. The city council voted, I believe the vote was 7-2, to put a ballot measure on to eliminate the city attorney's civil jurisdiction. That is a 22% approval rating. That is down in the dumps with the public's approval rating for Congress. The mayor and the city council have no confidence they get legal advice. This city attorney has taken us to things like the 101 Ash debacle, the secret streetlight surveillance program, She's filed frivolous lawsuits against the voters, cost us over about $600,000 to pay the other side's lawyers. These are not acceptable things. We need a city attorney that we can trust.
Thank you. Start the next question with you, Mr. Briggs. Who is the city attorney's client? Is it the public, as Michael Leary asserted, the mayor and all the departments under the mayor, or the city council? If you say all three, how do you escape the inevitable conflicts of interest among them?
The client is the city. The city attorney, if elected, is accountable to the voters. The city attorney is put on a team by the voters to work with the mayor and the city council. The city attorney gives advice to the mayor and the city council. That advice should be public, not private, so that the public knows exactly what the mayor and the city council are being told, so that when they're held accountable for their decisions, the public knows whether it's bad legal advice from the lawyer, as they've been getting from the current city attorney, or whether it's bad decision-making by the mayor and the city council. There's no conflict in any of that. The loyalties are to the taxpayers and to the voters, and the way you avoid conflicts is by being fully transparent, giving your best legal advice to the mayor and the city council, and you let everybody see it in the light of day.
Thank you. Ms. Elliott?
I want to respond to a statement that was made. I want to point out that during the primary election, I received nearly 70% of the vote, and that was nonpartisan support. And what that indicates to me is that the public appreciates that I am willing to stand up for them and put my neck out. And what Mr. Briggs indicates is that he is not, because an easy deal would have just been to turn the other cheek and not ask questions. And that is exactly what we have to do. And as for transparency, this is a candidate who erased his entire Twitter feed so that nobody can see what he thinks. That's not transparency. What the public wants is for somebody that stands up for them and asks the difficult questions, even if they get raked over the coal. And that's exactly what happened with San Diego State University. I stood alone and I upset people, but that's exactly what people expected me to do. And as a result of standing strong, the city got a good deal. And after all, that's what we want, a good deal both for the city, but we also want one for SDSU. And I think this is going to be a project we can be proud of in the future.
Thank you. I've been asked just to reiterate that we don't want attacks between opponents, just addressing the question as best you can. So I'll just reiterate that. The next question, starting with Ms. Elliott, should the city attorney continue to be elected, or should the position be appointed, and why?
I absolutely believe that this needs to be an elected position. I think that the voters want to decide who is going to protect their interests. That is democracy. And I am dumbfounded that this discussion is happening at this time. And what Mr. Briggs didn't share with you is that in January, he proposed this change from an elected city attorney to an appointed city attorney. So what would happen is you'd have council members selecting their attorney behind closed doors, and talk about a lack of transparency. Whereas we have forums right now where the public can assess me and my agenda and decide if I'm what they want. If they don't like me, they're going to let me know that in November. That is accountability. So I fear for the public if you have 9 council members who are determining what legal advice they'll get, because mind you, if that attorney doesn't give them what they want to hear, that attorney is going to be out of a job.
Thank you. Mr. Briggs?
I think the voters are more than capable of deciding whether they want an elected city attorney or appointed city attorneys, and I intend to honor their will. To that end, I propose today that if the voters decide to get rid of the city attorney's civil jurisdiction and I'm elected, I would ask the city council to put out a ballot measure to eliminate the city attorney's criminal jurisdiction. Right now, the city's budget sets aside about $15 million per year to do criminal prosecutions when the public already pays taxes to the district attorney's office to do those prosecutions. So we should be streamlining government. And if we're going to ask the public to get rid of the civil jurisdiction, the next question is, do we get rid of the criminal jurisdiction? The public needs to know when they make these decisions. My opponent talks about transparency, but remember that she proposed gutting the California Public Records Act so that it would be harder for members of the public to get information about what's happening. That is something that would concern any voter.
Thank you very much. Speaking of the Public Records Act, we had several questions regarding the police department and transparency. One question was, what changes to the California Public Records Act do you think would bring more transparency regarding the police and the district attorney's office? And or the city attorney's office, excuse me. And there has been criticism of the Brady's List for hiding dishonest cops. Critics say that their information will only be released if the cases go to trial, which is rare. How would you change this if elected?
But this is for me, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. The Public Records Act at the state level could be modified so that there's a lower threshold for getting police records. Right now, it requires serious accusations of physical wrongdoing or of dishonesty. At the city level, we can stop protecting bad cops in the union contracts. In addition, we can eliminate the Brady List. The current city attorney maintains a Brady List. It's a secret list of cops known to be dishonest. They can be prosecuted as misdemeanors within the current city attorney's jurisdiction, and they are not. The list should not be maintained. If there are bad officers, they should be prosecuted, and they should not be on the payroll of the public. And if they are good officers who are on the list for retaliatory purposes, they should be off the list so they are free to go about doing a good job for San Diegans.
Thank you. Ms. Elliott?
I have two questions that he responded to that I'd like to respond to. On the Public Record Act, what I proposed was a meet and confer component, which means let's talk before you sue. Mr. Briggs is our biggest violator. Point of example, about a week and a half ago, he sued us because he claims that we responded to him 1 day late. That's the taxpayers who will pay him because he found a loophole. And he's done well for himself doing that. He's really enriched himself. That's what I proposed, and I think people think that's reasonable. Is it gutting it? No. Is it making him a little poorer? Absolutely it is. I have proposed a public information office, and I've been doing that for 1.5 years. I don't get to create these things. I ask for the budget. It hasn't gone anywhere. We need a dedicated staff who is responsive to the public when they have questions and they ask for information. Right now, it's all over the city, and with a city of 11,000, that's really difficult to do. The Brady List, that's a U.S. Supreme Court law or case. Randy Mize, the public defender, and I just did a op-ed together to explain to people like Mr. Briggs who don't understand the law that we must keep a Brady List of officers who have engaged in misconduct. Misconduct is serious. That is prosecuted by the district attorney. No wonder Mr. Briggs wants to get rid of our criminal division. He hasn't a clue what it does. We prosecute low-level offenses.
Thank you. We have some more questions regarding Sdpd. Would you take any steps to reform the Sdpd to make it more neighborhood oriented? And do you think defunding should be considered? Ms. Elliott?
I think when we're talking about defunding, we're talking about reprioritizing, and I couldn't agree with that more. I believe that the public has spoken loud and clear that for the most part, if they want to take care of their problems when they can take care of their problems, and they want police interference when it's needed. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I worked closely with the communities to create that type of an atmosphere, whether it's finding solutions for people who are on drugs and need housing and trying to get them housed, something that's been blocked by my opponent, so that they don't go through the criminal justice system, to encountering them on the streets and not writing them up, getting them instead to services. That is what I think people want to see. But our law enforcement officers have a lot on their plate, and it slowly has grown through the years. This is a time for us to reassess what the needs are and to try to reallocate the money to the things that make the most sense. But you have to be able to have collaboration and communication. Suing because you don't like what someone says is not the answer to collaboration. Working with the communities, as I've done for the last 4 years, is the answer.
Thank you. Mr. Briggs?
The city attorney is the top law enforcement official in the city. The city attorney's office advises police officers. So everything that the police department is doing goes through the city attorney's office and is blessed by the city attorney's office. Problems that you see in the police department are a reflection of bad advice and lack of oversight from the city attorney's office. I encourage folks to go look at my opponent's interview from 4 years ago when she was running the first time. She was interviewed on local cable television, and the interview begins by talking about the country being in the wake of the Ferguson riots. And the same spiel that she just gave is essentially what she gave to the interviewer there. So my question is, we've had these problems for at least 4 years, and now it's important for her to do something about it. It's only important to do something because she's running for re-election. What has she done during those 4 years other than say the same thing and accomplish nothing?
Thank you. Another question regarding the police department. Mr. Briggs, you'll start this one. Do you support the San Diegans for Justice's effort to create an independent police commission with subpoena powers and its own legal counsel? If you did not support it in the past, what has changed your thinking?
I supported it from the very beginning. I've supported it the entire time I'm a candidate. I supported it even before I was a candidate. And unlike my opponent, I did not bring forward a competing watered-down version in order to protect the police union from stricter scrutiny from an independent commission.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott.
Let's just make sure that we understand city government. I do not oversee the police department. The police department has a chief. The mayor oversees the chief. We do not advise on everything they do. That is absolute nonsense, and I apologize to the public for that. It's unfortunate that we can't be truthful in a forum. As for this so-called competing measure, since I took over as city attorney, I have ensured that the CRB has its own independent counsel. I wanted to put that into effect immediately, which required a charter change because we did not know how long it would take for the Woman Occupy measure, which redoes the CRB, to take effect, or if it would be approved at all. And a couple years ago, it was really unclear whether it would be. That was the motivation. And I think that people who understand the record appreciate and know that.
Thank you. We had one question that came in through the Q&A. If elected, and we'll start with you, Ms. Elliott, if elected, well, you are, if you're elected again, would you refer bad cops from the Brady's list to the DA for prosecution?
The district attorney has the same list we do. It is shared. Every law enforcement agency is required to compile it. That's a US Supreme Court case. And we follow the law. So for Mr. Briggs to suggest that we somehow could just independently change the law, and you couple that with California's very stringent personnel laws that protect law enforcement officers, he would be violating the law. We don't have that ability. I'm not going to break the law because he's making false accusations and directing people to email me and demonize me and that kind of thing. I follow the law. If we want to see a change in the law, we need to pursue that and do it right. But we all, as law enforcement agencies, keep these lists, and the district attorney will prosecute police who engage in misconduct. That's what they do. If you read an article in the paper describing a shooting, it will end by saying this matter has been sent to the district attorney's office for review. That's exactly why that happens.
Thank you. Mr. Briggs?
The city attorney's office has misdemeanor jurisdiction. A number of crimes committed by peace officers involving dishonesty are misdemeanors by statute. They don't have to be referred to the district attorney's office. More serious violent offenses do, but the ones involving dishonesty need not be referred. The city attorney knows, she admits that she keeps the list. There's no reason to keep a secret list of dishonest police officers. If you put a dishonest officer on the stand, you could lose your law license. That's why she keeps the list. She knows who not to put on the stand, but she does nothing to keep those people from being on the streets, patrolling, protecting the public when they're dishonest. There's absolutely no excuse for the city attorney to pass the buck and blame somebody else. Your audience is free to go read Penal Code Section 118 and all the others that say misdemeanor, 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 or under 1 year, or up to 1 year in jail.
Thank
Can I
you.
respond?
No, we'll move on. We don't respond. We just try to keep this as civil as we can, if you can. Let's move on to gun violence and safety. We had several questions there. California's gun violence restraining order, do you think that that has been effective in preventing gun violence, Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Elliott?
Oh, absolutely. It was one of the biggest objectives I had when I took over as city attorney. I am raising 2 young boys. They were the same age as the children who were massacred during Sandy Hook. And I felt as local officials that we could do more. So we started a gun violence restraining order program in San Diego that has now gotten national recognition because it is so good. And we know that we are saving lives. And the state of California believes in our program to such an extent that they have given us money to train other law enforcement agencies throughout the state. We're saving people from suicides, from gun violence, from school shootings, from domestic violence. It is one of the most important things that I've done as city attorney. And in terms of prosecuting so-called bad cops, yes, we have prosecuted cops for domestic violence. We have prosecuted and obtained gun violence restraining orders against law enforcement officers, DUIs. So they are not getting a so-called free pass, but to have to search the codes to try to find an archaic code to try to hang me on is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, thank you very much. Another gun violence and safety question was the San Diego Safe Storage Ordinance meant to prevent unintentional shootings, such as we've recently read in the paper. Do you think anything else can be done to prevent children finding guns and harming themselves, Ms. Elliott?
I do. I, first of all, will note that my opponent called that a political stunt, but the school district certainly didn't, and they embraced it and they notified their attendees and parents of the problem. I never again want to read about what happened here in Scripps Ranch with a 10-year-old child who found a gun that was unsecured in his neighbor's garage and killed himself. And the kids that returned to school the next day returned to an empty desk and no logical explanations. I think there's always more we can do. Forums where we're talking about the laws, because my intention is to educate first. If you've got a dead child, you know, what good is that ordinance going to do? So the work we have to do is making sure people are informed of the law and that they know where they can get trigger locks or they can get lock boxes so that they can keep their families safe. So that is challenging, but fortunately I've had a lot of community assistance to get the word out.
Thank you. Mr. Briggs?
The reason I said it was a political stunt is that when she got the law passed, she then said she didn't have any intention of enforcing it. It was just going to be a matter of public education. As a lawyer, I wouldn't put forward legislation that was likely to get the city sued, that was probably unconstitutional, that would require the taxpayers to pay some plaintiff's attorney's fees if all I was going to do is embark on a public education campaign. I note that we had another tragedy recently over in the college area, and my colleague's comment was essentially that the child was in her thoughts and prayers. That's not acceptable. The other reason it's a stunt is because there's no oversight to make sure that it's not applied in a discriminatory manner. Voice of San Diego just did a story a couple days ago about how Black students represent 6% of the population and 12% of the suspensions. In San Diego, Blacks represent 6% of the population and somewhere between 13 and 14% of the gun violence restraining order prosecutions. Is that being done in a non-discriminatory manner? It sure doesn't sound like it.
Thank you. Moving on to another question on housing and the legality of short-term vacation rentals in San Diego. What is your position and what regulations would you support, Mr. Briggs?
Well, they're illegal. On this much, my colleague and I agree. She campaigned the first time saying they are illegal. She was right at the time. She's changed her tune now that she gets donations from people in that business. It's not my job to propose regulations. They are illegal. If the city council and the mayor want to make them lawful, they can put forward something. But at this time, they are illegal, and we need to enforce it just like every other law that's on the books and not be playing favorites for people who hold fundraisers for us.
Ms. Elliott?
Back to the GVROs, I just want to point out that those are complaint driven. It's typically the family that contacts us. It is not us trying to pinpoint any particular race. We respond to danger, we address it, we keep the city safe. Short-term rentals, I don't know of any short-term rental company that has supported me, so that is news to me. No so-called fundraisers being held to help me. I said it's not legal because it's not covered in our municipal code. We need a definition, we need regulations, we need leadership at the council to get that done. We had a council member propose regulations only to rescind her own regulations under threat, and that is not leadership. We have Jennifer Campbell having proposed some regulations yesterday, And we are going to drop everything to help her get some regulations on the books, because the fair thing to do is to give regulations that everybody can follow. I believe the industry wants to be in compliance, and I believe that neighborhoods want to see good neighbor policies that are enforced. I cannot do this alone. Other cities have accomplished it. San Diego has not. But again, it's a lack of leadership, and I'm just very grateful to Dr. Campbell for stepping up to the plate.
Thank you very much. The next question is on an apparent disagreement between both of you over a rehabilitation center in South Bay with 81 beds for substance abuse treatment. The questioner said Ms. Elliott spearheaded the effort, but Mr. Briggs sued to stop it. Can you comment on this, please, Ms. Elliott?
Yeah, so this is the program that I think has made a difference in people's lives. We have individuals who enter our criminal justice system who are addicted to drugs, and their drug addiction leads them to commit crimes, and eventually they become homeless. We created a program where we look at the underlying issues so that we can help them remedy that and get back on their feet. It's been very successful, and it's been in place for years now. Since I took over, it went full force. We typically will rent a bed at an independent living facility, but that's not great. There's a lot of temptation in that, and it's also very hard to manage. So we purchased a dilapidated, drug-ridden hotel where there was a lot of crime, and rehabilitated it so that we can house 81 individuals who are ready to change their lives. Well, my opponent created a reason to sue to block it several years ago. So here we've been in legal limbo, and I've got 81 beds I haven't been able to fill with people who are ready to change their lives. If we want to get serious about homelessness, we need to stop this nonsense, and we all need to do our share and help our community members. They are our constituents.
Thank you very much. Mr. Briggs?
The lawsuit was filed, not because I made something up, but because the Coastal Commission staff told Councilmember David Alvarez at the time that it was illegal and it didn't follow the rules. And in fact, it didn't follow the rules. And worse than that, this is an example of exporting downtown's problems to other parts of the city. My opponent moved this down to the South Bay, took away the only visitor-serving hotel in the South Bay for people who want coastal access in violation of the Coastal Act. The need for services for folks who will be served by this facility is downtown. That's where all the service providers are. So why we would spend $13 million to move people into a neighborhood of color, that's the reason, because it was the least politically problematic place to put them. As opposed, instead of being a leader and putting them downtown where the problems arose, where the problems persist, and where people can get help, she simply exported them.
Thank you. There's a question here on the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Briggs, you'll go first. What have you done in your professional capacity to help San Diegans get through the COVID-19 pandemic, and what more should the city be doing?
So most of your audience knows that I'm in private practice, and in addition to doing public interest cases, I have a number of clients who are small businesses. They were seriously affected. We did a lot of work for dozens and dozens. I'm inclined to tell you it's about 50, but it could be a little bit less, might be a little bit more. 50 small businesses who needed help getting their loans, who needed help coming into compliance with county regulations, who needed to make sure that their employees were still going to get paid. And by the way, we did all of that pro bono.
Elliott?
That has been what's kept us busy. We have a staff at the city of almost 11,000 people that almost overnight needed to be relocated to work from home. And that is not easy when you're working with unions and you're trying to ensure that everybody's set up and they have access and can continue to provide city services without interruption. Took a great deal of time. We quickly crafted the eviction moratorium that was voted on by our council, helped with rental assistance programs, small business programs. We had to get childcare in place for law enforcement who was working 24 hours a day. So we worked on all the contracts and quickly moved that through the system. We were hopping with all the complaints we were getting about price gouging or fraud associated with folks taking advantage of those who were in need. The mayor had never done an executive order before. We had to guide him on a day-to-day basis with the ever-changing climate so that he could do what he needed to do to quickly respond to a crisis. And those challenges continue today, especially as we take steps backwards instead of forwards.
Thank you. We have a question here on the municipal code. The existing municipal code was last updated quite a while ago and does not address new issues such as the vacation rentals, dockless scooters, ride sharing, etc. Do you think the code needs to be updated, or can it be amended with regard to any particular issue that arises? Elliot?
I'm sorry, did you say me?
Yes.
Yeah, so there are provisions in the municipal code that address scooters and address short-term rentals when it comes to granny flats. So there are always municipal code changes coming. Our municipal code is huge. So I'm not quite sure what the question means with regard to an overhaul. I mean, that would take a long time, but we are always updating the code and responding to the current climate and the needs of our community.
Thank you. Mr. Briggs?
There's a need to always revisit your codes to see whether changed circumstances require an update. I took your question to be directed at the incumbent's failure to prosecute scooter companies and short-term vacation rentals and blame it on the lack of adequate rules on the books. The rules on the books exist. As she said, there's no provision in the municipal code for short-term vacation rentals. Under our permissive code, that makes them illegal automatically. We have rules about scooters in state law that could have been enforced. They weren't enforced. So lots of things could have been done. It was convenient to say we're not going to do it because these organizations donate a lot of money to incumbents like my opponent. But as an excuse for not doing your job, it doesn't cut it. The reality is simultaneously that you have to revisit these things every so often to make sure they reflect the latest and greatest information.
Thank you. We have a question on the smart streetlights. What can the city attorney do to limit the damage to our privacy caused by the decision to contract for smart streetlights, and how can the data they generate be used appropriately? Mr. Briggs?
This city attorney should recuse from all future considerations of it because she owns General Electric stock, and she did when she approved the contract. She also was not capable of reading it and disclosing all of the bad parts of it before she put her seal of approval on it. So what the city attorney can do is read the contracts and disclose everything in them and give the city council and the mayor, as I did last November, ways to get out of the contract. The contract is void because the city attorney had a conflict. But because she's our city attorney, she obviously isn't going to do anything in court to press the conflict because she'd have to fall on her sword.
Ms. Elliott?
Well, I can assure you that if this contract could have been voided and Mr. Briggs could have sued, he would have done that in a heartbeat. He'll sue if you sneeze the wrong way. I don't have a conflict, and he knows that because he's already brought a complaint with the Ethics Commission. We own about $18,000 in stock for my kids' college education. Barbara Bree also owns stock in GE, and he's never made a fuss over her. So this is clearly a political attack. As for the contract, it was approved on my very first day in office. There was a long buildup to that contract, and it very explicitly says in there that these lights may be used for public service safety purposes. The police department didn't know about these lights. They were intended to monitor traffic, and they didn't find out for a couple of years. And once they did find out, because they were responding to an incident that had happened and somebody noticed the light, they briefed the city council and said, hey, this is a great law enforcement tool. We'd like to start using it. Nobody did anything about that for a year and a half. Now an ordinance is coming to the city council to address concerns communities have about privacy, and we're helping them to draft that.
Thank you very much. We had someone ask that we go back to the question about San Diegans for Justice's effort to create the Independent Police Commission and whether you supported that. And if you did support it in the past, what changed your mind? They specifically wanted Ms. Elliott to say yes or no. She agrees with the Independent Police Commission as recommended by San Diegans for Justice.
I think that having independent commissions is a very wise thing for any city to do. And in this criminal justice reform discussion that has come up repeatedly, it is inappropriate for the person who's writing the impartial analysis on a measure that's going to voters to formally endorse it.
Thank you. That's pretty much all the questions we have. So before our candidates give their closing remarks, I want to thank you for attending and asking such good questions. I encourage everyone to use the League's Voters Edge online resource for more information about candidates, ballot measures, and detailed voting information. All candidates for local offices have been invited to include their information there at no cost, and I hope both our candidates tonight have already included their information there. Lastly, please check our website, lwvsandiego.org, for more events that will provide in-depth information on all sides, critical issues affecting our communities. And now for the candidates' closing statements. Each candidate, you have 2 minutes, and we will begin with Ms. Elliott.
I thank everybody for their attention and making time for us on a beautiful evening. This is a choice during a very difficult time for our nation, for the entire world as we're dealing with the pandemic. This is not time for someone to learn on the job. We need a serious candidate who has proven herself in terms of delivering for the public, and I have spent an entire career doing that. My opponent has spent his career suing public entities, and every time he wins, which isn't too frequent, he's taking away the services that we need here in San Diego 83 times. That's our count of lawsuits against the city of San Diego. That is absolutely not normal. This is a person who judges have referred to as having conduct that was unethical and possibly criminal. When he uses his nonprofit organizations that lack absolute transparency to sue the city, we have no idea what happens to that money. There's no record. But when somebody asks a question like iNewsSource did about these so-called clients, he sued to shut them down. He sued to break them. They have a First Amendment right to communicate to the public and say, hey, this is what's going on. And here's the guy that's taking your tax dollars and lining his pockets. That is not what we need as city attorney. We need trusted leadership. We need somebody who's going to get it done. And that is who I am. I am the first woman to serve in this position. And I think it shows because I care about our children. I care about where I'm raising them. I care about our taxpayers. I care about our communities. The idea of getting rid of our criminal division, what do we use them for? They respond to the things that drive us crazy in our neighborhoods. Is the DA going to prosecute quality of life offenses? Absolutely not. Is she going to create these programs that help people get out of the criminal justice system and back on their feet? No, because we can handle that at the misdemeanor level. There is so much potential for this position, and I think I've shown that to you over the last 3.5 years. So thank you for the attention.
Thank you. Mr. Briggs?
Thanks again to the League and to the Town Council and to everybody for sticking it out tonight. I appreciate the opportunity. You heard my colleague say that it's inappropriate for her to take a position on the Independent Police Commission because she's drafting the ordinance, but she didn't think it was inappropriate to take a position on the secret streetlight surveillance contract, even though she owns stock in it. Your audience should just ponder that inconsistency for a moment. Secondly, the city attorney's job is to make sure that the city doesn't break the law. The reason my clients hire me to sue is because the city broke the law. So if you stop breaking the law, which is what will happen if I'm the city attorney, you won't be getting sued. If it's not Corey Briggs, it's going to be somebody else because nobody likes lawbreakers. And the biggest lawbreaker is the city, and it's advised, or inadvised, I should say, ill-advised by the incumbent, and that's what happens. Now you have a choice in this race between competency, transparency, and integrity. That's Corey Briggs. Or none of them. That's Mara Elliott. That's what this comes down to. Who do you trust to give good legal advice, to be fully transparent, and to be ethical about it? The comment that was made about my ethics a few moments ago, all of that is drummed up by a news organization that was paid by the hotel industry after my client successfully defeated the first convention tax measure that was put forward without a public vote. They were angry about it, and your audience can go to briggslawcorp.com/blog and look at the evidence itself to see that the current city attorney, Mara Elliott's chief of staff, Jerry Braun, was part of a smear campaign to go after me to retaliate for the success that my clients had on behalf of taxpayers and voters to make sure that the Constitution was followed. I'm proud of that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. On behalf of the Claremont Town Council and the League of Women Voters of San Diego, I want to thank the candidates for running for office and attending our forum this evening, and thank all of you again. You're here tonight because you are following the League motto, don't just be a voter, be an informed voter. So vote in November and encourage others to vote as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.